I had honestly planned for X5 to be the last title in the series, but somehow I found myself with X6. I feel like I owe the fans an apology, but I have to admit the series was starting to go in a direction that was out of my control. I plan to re-examine the situation and be more careful with how I handle the Mega Man name from now on. Released against Inafune's wishes by Capcom, Mega Man X6 had the shortest development cycle so far at only 10 months. Capcom wanted to squeeze out one more game for the holiday season before PS1 games would get discontinued in favor of the new PS2. So what we ended up getting was an incredibly rushed game that didn't have enough time to be tested properly. The game was so rushed they didn't even have time to remove the Japanese voice acting in the English dub. It's definitely jarring reading text in English and then hearing little voice bits in Japanese. The game opens with a summary of X5's plot, the destruction of Earth, and Zero's death. X has taken Zero's saber to carry on his memory, so the game continues X's good ending from the previous game since he still remembers his friend. A mad scientist Reploid named Gate is investigating the crash site of the space colony Eurasia when he stumbles across a piece of Zero's DNA data, whatever that means. Really? In this giant wreckage and he just happens to immediately find it? Alright. Right away, this game is riddled with spelling mistakes, which is a pretty big indicator of the sort of quality you should expect. There is no one else is left to fight. How dare he talks about Sigma that way? Zero has nothing to do this. The dialogue is also very clearly a word-for-word translation from Japanese to English, with seemingly very little work done on localization. As a result, the dialogue is stilted and sometimes makes little sense. Like X5 carrying over the 4th armor from X4, X6 has you starting with the Falcon armor from X5. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of this continuity. I hated how in X2 through 4, you build up your armor only for it to magically vanish in the next game. The intro stage is a big improvement over X5's, and effectively teaches you how to use Zero's saber, but it's also a pretty boring and forgettable way to start the game. Near the end of the opening stage, a new character named Hymax will appear to challenge you. Like Vile in the first game, he's unbeatable, so you just have to survive. He says he's investigating the Zero Nightmare, but doesn't elaborate any further. But don't you worry, audience of mine, you'll soon find out what that is. And you'll wish you hadn't. Hey, real quick, I just wanted to remind everyone that I've got a video on Mega Man X1 through 4 on my channel. If you somehow haven't watched that yet, then you should go ahead and do that after this. I also have a Patreon, and your support helps fund my time and energy putting these together. So, if you want to be a cool dude, go to patreon.com/wesdoesgames. Thank you, now back to the video. Apparently since the space station crashed, Reploids have been having strange nightmares, which has led them to malfunctioning or harming themselves. This is all explained by a Reploid named Isok. Who is Isok? Some guy, I guess. The game makes no effort to explain who he is at all. Isok says the nightmares are being caused by the ghost of Zero, which, I mean, androids believe in ghosts now? Do Reploids dream of electric zeros? Isok is kinda interesting because he's clearly designed to look like Dr. Wily. This was confirmed by illustrator Haruki Sugutsu, who said that he was thinking of a certain scientist when he designed him. Personally, I think he looks more like the king of all cosmos, but that's just me. There's also a lot to imply that Isok is the robotic host of Dr. Wily's AI, such as his hatred of X and knowledge of Zero's inner workings, and his pride of Zero's strength. But it's just a weird choice because we already did all this with Surges in X2. And like Surges in X2, the story really doesn't go anywhere with this potentially fascinating character. They just relegate him to forgettable tertiary antagonist, and it's like, why did they bother? Anyways, Isok assembles a team of 8 investigators who will end up being the 8 Maverick bosses you fight in the game. They apparently were all created by Gate and worked for him before being killed off before the events of the game, and are brought back to life using nightmare magic or whatever. Don't think too hard about it. They are simultaneously the best and worst Mavericks in the series. They're the worst because their fights are absolutely abysmally designed and a nightmare to play. But they also have some of the best and weirdest backstories in the series. Commander Yamark is a giant dragonfly. Yamark is some sort of a pun on the word dragonfly and seemingly not a very good one, and of course it's completely meaningless to a non-Japanese audience. He was originally killed by his coworkers because he accidentally started a forest fire, and now that he's been brought back to life by Gate, he's super paranoid that everyone is coming to get him. Especially his old coworker, Smokey Baratron, who doesn't f**k around with forest fires. Rainy Turtleoid. Despite having the dumbest name I've ever heard, he has some interesting things going for him. He's the largest Maverick boss in the series, even larger than that big ol' walrus from X4. He can only be injured after you damage the jewels on his back, which makes the fight extra challenging. Turtloid's backstory involves him offing himself in order to avoid a shameful situation, which I guess makes the feudal Japan-inspired level more apropos. Hey, I didn't write this shit, okay? Shield Sheldon is a giant clam who also has a shell and also offed himself, just like Rainy Turtloid. God, this game is getting bleak. His backstory is that he was a bodyguard to a high-profile doctor and failed to prevent him from going Maverick. He killed the doctor, and then he himself was branded a Maverick by the Maverick Hunters, thus leading to his self-imposed demise. X and Zero apologized to him for the misunderstanding, and it's honestly nice getting to see some bosses that aren't so morally black and white. Ground Scaravich concerns me, not just because he's a dung beetle, and so all the jokes about him being a shitty boss write themselves, but because we're sliding dangerously close to X2's overabundance of bug-themed bosses. I don't want to fight any more bugs, damn it. Scaravich was a treasure hunter who wandered into a forbidden area where X and Zero were discovered, and the Maverick Hunters had him killed for breaking and entering. Guess the Maverick Hunters are big, castle doctrine kind of people. Gate resurrects Scaravich only for him to get killed by the player. This guy just can't catch a break. Infinity Maginian is a water flea-themed Reploid, and frankly, it's baffling to me that Capcom went with water flea when things like, I don't know, House Cat, Wolverine, Skunk, freaking Horse, and more were all still options. Maginian works in this giant weapons lab and built this giant fighting robot to keep away intruders. I got some flack in my X2 video for calling Crystal Snail a bug, and so I'd like to clarify what I consider a bug. A bug must satisfy two of the three conditions. 1. Is small and crawls around and I want to step on it. 2. Has a hard shell, or carapace if you're nasty. 3. Has a bunch of legs or eyes and is gross. I know this isn't scientific, but there you go. Crystal Snail is a bug, and so is Infinity Maginian. And there are too many bugs. Metal Shark Player almost beats Rainy Turtloid for worst named boss, but not quite. He worked at a Reploid recycling factory where he started bringing Reploids back to life using their DNA, which in the Megman world is frowned upon, like jaywalking or necrophilia. There's nothing in the context of the story or dialogue that explains why his name is Metal Shark Player, or why it's so f***ing stupid. I really like the idea that resurrecting Reploids is considered a forbidden science. It makes his special attacks all the more, special. He could summon Sting Chameleon from X1, Magna Centipede from X2, and Blast Hornet from X3. They're like unfinished soulless versions though, which makes it pretty freaky. The charged version of his weapon even summons a bunch of Storm Eagle clones, which is pretty cool. Blaze Heatnix is a phoenix who thinks he's better than everyone, and who probably has some of the most egregious English in the game. Brainwashing Reploids is lame. Don't you think so? Let's fight to see who is the strongest. Blizzard Wolfang was a former Maverick hunter who led a team in the North Pole and was the sole survivor of a Maverick assault. Wolfang, like Shield Sheldon, was unjustly labeled a Maverick himself and was offed by the Maverick Hunters. Apparently it was Aaliyah herself who did it, and as the game progresses, we slowly see that underneath Aaliyah's innocent demeanor is a stone-cold killer. Despite these Maverick backstories being interesting, it takes a lot of supplemental reading to piece together these narratives because the English translation is so freaking bad. And X's motivation for fighting them is pretty one-note and obtuse. Each fight begins with X going, "Hey, what'd you say about my friend Zero? F*** you, I'll destroy you." And then he re-kills them. Hey, you there, do you like Mega Man? How about wearing clothing? If you fit either of these categories, you may just like these new fashionable items on the Wes Does Games store. First, we have this X design, which comes with all sorts of variations. But maybe you're more of a Zero sort of fella. Well, he's here too. There's even a black armor version which can be unlocked with money, rather than a combination of button presses on a title screen. I've also got sweatshirts with these designs and stickers too. And if any of this tickles your fancy, you may want to check out my other items, such as this Lloyd shirt, or this Lucina sweatshirt, or this Snake shirt where he has the big booty. Buy now at wesdoesgames.shop. I'm currently running a sale for the first 10 days of whenever this video gets posted. If If you're watching this in the future, you missed your chance at greatness. Go be sad. So go to wesdoesgames.shop now for 10% off the Mega Man X collection for a limited time. Okay, now back to the video. Throughout the stages, you'll collect these blue orbs called Nightmare Souls. You'll get power-ups by saving Reploids, but how many power-ups you could equip is dependent on the amount of Nightmare Souls you have. Aaliyah technically explains the mechanic like one time in the game, but her English was so broken I had no idea what she was talking about, so I had to learn about this through a guide. Besides the bad English translation, there's a lot of other janky things that indicate a rushed development. In the Amazon level, there's these praying mantis enemies that are just clearly broken, with their hitboxes being totally off. I'm shooting it in the head and nothing is happening. Also, this may seem like a minimal complaint, but I hate how the dialogue is fed to you a few words at a time. Look how much space is in this text box, why is this not being used? To offset all the hate here, I do want to commend the game for the alternate paths they incorporated into each level. The 8 main stages all have a hidden warp panel that will take you to one of 3 potential secret boss fights. I love stuff like this and I'm glad that they added it. The first secret boss I'll mention is Dynamo from X5. He's come back to cause some mischief, just cuz. 4. You can also run into Hymax as a boss fight. He's very hard and it's unlikely you'll beat him, but interestingly, if you're able to beat him, he'll open a path to the final stage of the game. X6 basically allows you VIP access to the end of the game if you're a good enough player, without having to fight any of the 8 bosses. Hymax is down? Kuh! We'd better withdraw for now. I'll invite you to my laboratory. No more hiding. Gate is such a freaking weirdo and I don't understand his dialogue at all. The third potential boss is Nightmare Zero. Once you beat him, regular Zero appears and reveals to X that he's still alive, and you can now play as him for the remainder of the game. So you may be wondering, how exactly did Zero survive X5? Well, I hid myself while I repaired myself. This explanation is about as satisfying as somehow Palpatine returned. Could we really not come up with anything better, guys? I've seen a lot of folks say that X6 has the best soundtrack. I think the OST is pretty good, but I wouldn't call it the greatest of all time. There's a notable shift in the X6 soundtrack from what we're used to. I can't really put my finger on it, but it's definitely unique. Here's a few of my favorite songs. A lot of times Mega Man X6 feels borderline unplayable. Some of the Reploids require you to completely sacrifice yourself in order to save them. Speaking of which, there are way too many Reploids to save. They're just littering every area. Hey, whoever left your damn injured Reploids laying around, come and pick them up. This is a shared community area, you can't just leave piles of Reploids everywhere. The stages seem to be designed to frustrate the player, rather than provide any sort of, fun. I like a challenge, but jumping through a floating platform area over an abyss while acid rain drains your health and enemies bombard you isn't my idea of a good time. And what kind of an evil person puts an enemy here? Blizzard Wolfang's whole level is the definition of suffering, with never-ending snowballs blocking your progress throughout. And what kind of an evil person puts an enemy here? The most egregious of these design choices, hands down, is the Nightmare system. So the story is about all these nightmare phenomena happening all around the world. Weird glitches in the Matrix that make a Reploid go crazy. Well, there's 8 nightmare effects, one for each stage. Once you beat a certain stage, that nightmare will randomly attach itself to a different stage. So as you progress, each stage will eventually become infected. I think there's more nuance to how it works than that, but you could correct me in the comments. A nightmare effect is a pain-in-the-ass obstacle that randomly inserts itself into the gameplay. It could be raining fireballs, or a giant cube that blocks your progress, or the screen going black except for this little sliver of light, making it near impossible to see oncoming enemies or pitfalls. These nightmare effects are game-breaking. Take Blizzard Wolfang's level, where the whole gimmick revolves around getting to a safe spot and sitting still while you wait out the avalanche of snowballs to pass by. You know what would really suck here? a Zero ghost that chases after you and attacks you while you literally can't move.
No! God, please, no!
Haha, like shooting fish in a barrel, boys, said the evil sons of bitches at Capcom. X6 also makes no accommodation for the nightmare effect in the stage, since there's always some degree of randomness to when and where they appear. Like I said earlier, this breaks the game. For example, when I played X6 originally, I got possibly the worst combination imaginable. Darkness on Rainy Turtleoid's stage. It's a level where you have to go on a scavenger hunt for these devices to blow up before you can proceed, and acid rain is pouring down on you as you're searching. With the rain overlay and the darkness, I can't see shit, and my HP is rapidly draining. I am completely and utterly boned. The stage designs and enemies were already designed to be cruel and cheap, but now add in this random bullshit engine, and you've got yourself one of the most maddening, hair-pulling video games you'll ever have the misfortune of playing. Attention! This is an important Wes update. I have replayed X6 from this original recording, and I like it a little bit better now. What changed the second time around? I avoided the nightmare stages entirely. Man, what a difference that one change makes. Without the nightmare effects, the game could actually be fun, something I never thought I'd say about X6. Don't get me wrong, many of the stages are still busted as hell, but some are okay. X6 tries really hard to be innovative. New antagonists, new gameplay additions, and while these ideas are usually not executed well, I am impressed that they tried at least. Infinity Maginian's level gimmick is that there's a giant fighting robot in the background trying to kill you, and you have to proceed through the stage while dodging attacks. It gets ridiculously cheap by the end, but it was still a cool idea. Shield Sheldon's stage has you solving these puzzles where you have to move the mirrors to reflect lasers and direct them towards a target. There's some fun to be had in this game, just so long as you avoid the nightmare stuff at all costs. The special weapons in X6 include the Yamar option, which, why is it called that? Where you summon these 3 little drones to follow you around and fire. The ground dash creates a big boulder you could hurl at enemies. The magma blade turns your Z-Saber into a freaking flaming sword, and it's quite metal. The ice burst lets X create ice cubes, which I guess would be useful if you want to cool down your drink, but that's about it. The meteor rain doesn't really remind me of a meteor at all. It's really more like a glob of chewing gum that sticks to the ceiling and then plops down like a heavy turd. The metal anchor lets you throw little anchors at enemies, which is cute, but barely does any damage. The guard shell creates an energy barrier in front of X, but before you get too excited, it only blocks lasers, so enjoy barely using this one, guys. And lastly, the ray arrow shoots just a regular-ass laser beam, which may not seem that exciting, but the charged version of this is super overpowered, and I may or may not have cheesed this one to sneak past difficult boss fights. Zero's moves are largely the same as the previous 2 entries. He's got his Rising Flame attack, his Ground Pound move, his Giga attack, etc, etc. All the usual moves you'd expect our favorite badass to be able to pull off. Notably though, he now has a move where he could clean to the ceiling like freaking Spider-Man. There's also a move where he does his best Sonic the Hedgehog impression, and it absolutely breaks the game with how useful it is. I honestly don't know if it's a glitch or if it's supposed to be this way. Carrying on the new tradition in X5, Mega Man could find parts for 2 unique armor sets. There's the Blade Armor, which prioritizes dashing and saber use, and the Shadow Armor, which basically turns X into a ninja and allows him to walk on spikes. X and/or Zero confront Gate in the final stage. He's beaten fairly easily. Afterwards, he reveals, for seemingly no reason, that he's resurrected Sigma by a means that's not explained at all. Sigma immediately kills Gate in the typical, "I didn't think the leopard would eat my face" fashion. "Drat," proclaims X, which seems like kind of an underwhelming response from someone who witnessed Robot Satan coming back to life for the 5th time. As X chases after Sigma, he finds Isaac's dead-ass body laying on the floor. Aaliyah comments that this is like the Erasure incident. That's a reference to Mega Man Extreme 2, in case you forgot. Pretty bold for Capcom to assume that most players would be familiar with that game. Is bold the right word? The whole scene is baffling. Isaac just dropped dead at some point with no explanation at all, beyond that his soul just left his body like some sort of Christian guilt trip. Why did this happen, and why now? Maybe it has something to do with Isaac being wily and his essence being transferred to Sigma when he was resurrected or something? I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know, so I guess there's just no point trying to understand it. Just let me sleep a little longer. I don't want to go to work. Yeah, the final battle with Sigma is kind of a joke. Honestly, the whole resurrecting Sigma thing feels pretty tacked on and out of nowhere. It doesn't really add anything to the story, so the final battle really should have just been with Gate. After Sigma's defeat, X and Zero wonder how they'll break the news to Aaliyah that Gate is dead. He may have been evil, but she and him did used to be close. Then Aaliyah and the gang show up, and she's just like, nah, it's cool. I love that everyone's just all smiles here. Douglas says that he's going to continue using his mechanic skills for good. Aaliyah says she wants to develop technology that will be safe from viruses, and Cygnus is like, and I'll just stand here. The game ends with Zero putting himself into a deep sleep so that studies can be done on the virus inside him and a cure could be found. This was the ending Inafune originally wanted for the series, as it leads up to Zero waking up in the Mega Man Zero games. Capcom, however, would break continuity once again by milking the franchise even further, but honestly, this scene could be interpreted as happening whenever, not necessarily just right after X6, so technically the continuity works well enough. When Mega Man X6 released in Japan, it was the 7th highest selling game during its first week, which is not amazing. It got mixed reviews, some people loving it for its replayability, and some people hating it for its difficulty. Despite only being the 109th best-selling game of the year, it still managed to get re-released in Japan under a best title. In America, that's like greatest hits. Despite all the problems X6 has, it does still have some positive traits. And the nice thing about a game this flawed is that the X series can only get better, right? If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more Mega Man content. Special thanks to David Saperstein, Zen, Curious Curse, Bosick, Chaz Pazenko, and Jilly Mays. You truly are Mega Men and Mega Woman. Thanks for being supporters of the channel, and if you want to be a supporter too, join my Patreon.